Thank you all so much for attending. My name is Perry Brandt, and this year I'm president of the Alumni Association, and I very much want to welcome everyone here. I happen to think we are on the premises of the best university on the planet and have the best students on the planet and the best alumni on the planet. So that's just my thought. There are 139,000 of us alumni around the world right now, and believe it or not, over 5,000 of us are here this weekend. Reunion and homecoming weekend is really our largest gathering of alumni that we have anywhere, although we have gatherings all over. But we're going to have at least 5,000 people here, and this includes not only the undergraduate reunions, but also the medical school, the law school, the Owen School, and the nursing school as well. And I'm sure you've seen all the tents up all over campus, and I think there's going to be some pretty good fun tonight to be had, and a great big football win tomorrow. Now, you can't have a reunion without somebody who's in charge, and it's my great privilege to introduce Ed Clark, who is our General Reunion Chair. Ed is a 1976 graduate of the engineering school, but I looked at my notes here and it said 1974.
Trying to make me older.
Well, he's what he said, you're trying to make, and then I said, yeah, but I'm 1974. What does that say about me? In 2013, the School of Engineering recognized Ed with the Distinguished Alumni Award, which is the school's highest honor. He's also a member of the Engineering Board of Visitors, and he is retired as president and CEO of FedEx Trade Networks and lives in Memphis. He's going to report on the reunion and our fundraising success, which, as you might success, is fantastic. And with that, I hand you over to Ed.
Thank you. Thank you, Perry. Good afternoon, and welcome home. Welcome home to Vanderbilt. This is an amazing university with amazing students, and actually in an amazing city. For those of you who haven't been here for a while. Speaking of amazing students, I was at a meeting this morning talking about our amazing students, and they were talking about, well, the average SAT score is now over 1,500, and the average ACT score is about 34, and I'm thinking, thank goodness I came as an old guy when I did. I would never get in today. But anyway, we do have some great students, yeah, and you'll hear about that in a minute. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have come from outside the Middle Tennessee area? Whoa, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. And just one other quick question. How many of you has it been over 5 years since you've been on campus? Wow, a lot. Well, things have changed. Vanderbilt's it's a great mixture of the new and the old, so hopefully you'll have time to look around and have a great time. I want to report to you on our reunion activities. This has been the work of about 645 reunion volunteers in all of the reunion classes that end in 6 and 1. So let me just take a minute. If you're a reunion volunteer, raise your hand. Wow, they're all here. Outstanding. Thank you so much for your help. These volunteers contacted over 10,000 alums. Just to let you know, we had a kickoff meeting for our reunion back in February. And we had two primary goals for the reunion. The first one was we want to get as many alums as we can just to come back to campus. There's so many good things going on in Vanderbilt and in Nashville. We just want you to come back to campus. And so the second primary goal we had is we wanted to make this the biggest and the best reunion in Vanderbilt history. Now, how we measure that is every year, not surprisingly, the goals are set a little higher for people and a little higher for giving. So for us, if we beat the attendance and the giving goal from last year, we will have achieved the goal of having the biggest and best reunion ever. And I'm pleased to announce today that we have achieved that. Hey! Perry mentioned that we have over 5,000 alums and guests on campus, which is fantastic. Again, thank you for coming. On the giving side, we have we have about 3,400 alums, and At the end of the first quarter of the football game tomorrow, we will get the pleasure and the honor, thanks to you, of presenting our Chancellor a check for $22.8 million, the highest ever. So thank you so much for helping us with that. And you know, given that we reached those goals, I have no research or facts to back this up, but we have lots of accolades you'll hear about for Vanderbilt. But I'd like to declare today that we also have the happiest alumni in the country. Can I do that? I don't know if that's, I don't know. I'm just going to do that on my own. Okay, now let me introduce our speaker for today. Nicholas Zeppos was named Vanderbilt's 8th Chancellor on March the 1st, 2008. Chancellor Zeppos has been a longtime member of the Vanderbilt family. He joined the Vanderbilt community in 1987 as an assistant professor in the law school. He won numerous teaching awards there. He subsequently served as an associate dean and then an associate provost. And then finally in 2002, he was named the provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs. In that role, he was responsible for overseeing all of the university's academic programs, undergraduate, graduate, professional. Also, all of its research efforts. He was also head of all of its budgeting and planning processes, and also head of its alumni and development efforts. As Chancellor, the vision and the leadership of Chancellor Zeppos have been responsible for numerous important initiatives that the university has taken on over the last few years. There have been many. A few of those that have been very important have been the Martha Rivers Ingram Commons, which was really somewhat of a landmark transformation for the first-year learning experience for freshmen. For those of you who haven't been here in 5 years, take a visit over to the Commons over at our Peabody School side of campus. It's a fantastic place. He also started the Warren and Moore colleges and the Vanderbilt Barnard College, which are the university's living, learning, residential college systems for upperclassmen. There was also, as most of you know, a recent restructuring of our clinical healthcare operations into a new corporate entity. And he's championed many other new programs that have been very important to the university. A lot of programs in academic areas, in strategic planning, in diversity and inclusion, in financial aid. I know a lot of you have heard about Opportunity Vanderbilt, commitment of Vanderbilt to basically admit students on the basis of accomplishment and achievement and not on their ability to pay. And as you know, Vanderbilt's remained one of the top 20 major universities in the country, which I think makes us all proud, and you may hear more about this in a minute. But we also always have some of the happiest students in the country also, so what a great combination. Chancellor Zeppos serves on numerous boards. I can't name them all. He's been a past president of the Southeastern Conference, and he's been a co-chair of a U.S. Senate committee, a task force on government regulation of higher education. So it's really a pleasure and an honor for me today to introduce our Chancellor at Vanderbilt, Nick Zeppos. Chancellor, welcome.
Thanks so much, Ed. Great to see you. Well, that's as good as it gets. And it's really a privilege to be here. I want to thank Perry Brandt for leading the alumni, all 100,000 plus on every continent, I believe. I'm sure some of you have traveled to Antarctica. I know some of our faculty do on occasion. And it is a noble and challenging task to communicate, engage across the globe. But I think Perry has done a fabulous job. My good friend Ed Clark, again, getting into leadership harness. Every time we've turned to Ed and said, we need your help, he's like, well, I've got something left in the tank. And so I really, really appreciate Ed stepping up. And it's really great to be here. I was really, really excited about this talk. I love the opportunity to look across the generations of Vanderbilt and see the gold and black continue through and have you come back to campus and say, wow, that's really different. But at the same time, have many of you say, as I walk across the campus, this is the Vanderbilt that I love and indeed that I remember. So it's great to be here, particularly after that Georgia win. I mean, and you go from tough questions to, well, I think I'm going to a bowl game. So let's get focused. Let's get focused. That's why David Williams is not. There's David, who's breaking film down. And so, but before we start, let me introduce, I have the privilege of working with a spectacular team. And chancellors are kind of like coaches, that if you get the coach who was the best player, they're never a good coach. Michael Jordan's not going to be a good coach. Maybe Steve Kerr, who passed the ball to Michael Jordan. So I have a fabulous team. I want them to stand up. George Hill is my Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. George is also a member of the National Academy of Medicine, the most distinguished society for biomedical researchers and for those who have affected care and the practice of medicine. George has been on the Vanderbilt faculty for over a decade. My Vice Chancellor for Information Technology, John Lutz, joined us several years ago. I rescued John from IBM. He had been there for 29 years, and he was either going to get his gold watch or cash in a lot of stock options. But I brought him down, and he's a gifted and talented individual. IT on these campuses is a challenging customer relations matter. When young people sit in their dorm room and they say, I have bad internet connection, it's all John's fault. I have Anders Hall. Anders joined us from Duke about 4 years ago, Anders. He heads up our endowment office. He invests the portfolio, stewards the portfolio, and while he cheers for Duke when they play North Carolina, he's definitely a Commodore. And then I have my Chief Financial Officer, Brett Sweet. Brett is a very, very talented individual, spent a number of years on a naval submarine, which means he's neither claustrophobic nor argumentative. And also a brilliant young man. He was in charge of the nuclear missiles and the nuclear reactor and everything under the water, and he left the Navy. I think he'd probably be the Secretary of Defense if he had stayed in, and went back to business school in Cambridge and was a partner in a major consulting firm and just wants to be in higher ed. So Brett was back at his business school alma mater at Harvard, and he saw so many benefits and joys of returning south. I grew up in Texas, and so a number of my team members aren't here. Is Audrey, Susan? Beth is back there. Beth Fortune, my Vice Chancellor for Communications and Public Affairs, more than a full-time job cleaning up after me. And so Beth is a phenomenal member of the team, been here, I believe, 14 years. And then I mentioned my great colleague and good friend, David Williams. David has been a close friend, a great advisor, and all that we're very proud about in terms of the student-athlete model, and really saying at this time in America, where are there true student athletes, and where do we have student athletes who win national championships? And my fingers, I don't have enough fingers for all the rings David has given me for all the championships. So David, thank you so much, and thank you for coming. And these are really the people, along with so many other people, that make Vanderbilt the special place it is. And I'm really privileged to work with them and have them on my team. So a great reunion. Ed said I was getting a check for $22 million. And I actually thought Vanderbilt was getting the check, Ed. I didn't know I was getting the check. So that's even more meaningful that you've kind of made it out in that way. I think it's pretty hard to steal something that big, but I'll look forward to accepting it with great joy from you and all your reuniting friends. We have 5,000 alumni here this weekend and 648 reunion volunteers that really made this weekend happen, that were at the last minute, are you coming, are you not coming? You know, we need you to kind of come and celebrate and give and be part of the community. So this is really your reunion, and I'm pleased to give you a little State of the University address. I'll talk about a number of topics, the finances of the university, the strategic direction of the university, some of the initiatives we have going on at the university, and then kind of what keeps me up at night in terms of the university, and then I'm very happy to take some questions. So I always like the quote of Chancellor Kirkland, in building universities, there is never an occasion for finishing touches. The task is always laying one of foundations. And I always keep that in mind, particularly since I've spent my entire academic career. As Ed noted, I came in 1987 as an assistant professor in the law school. And I'm at the point now where some of the people that I've taught are sending their children to Vanderbilt, and I take that with great honor and great compassion that I've been entrusted with not only teaching, but then taking care of the next generation. So I really see my job as stewardship. I really see my job as having the benefit of coming to Vanderbilt and then having a very long-term perspective about what is in the best interest of our university. The thing I love about our job is, we don't manage quarter to quarter. We don't report operating results. We don't have stock prices. We have a lot of constituents, but they expect us to steward Vanderbilt so it lasts 100, 200, 300 years. So stewardship, you'll hear me talk about that a lot, and it's a real privilege to be the chancellor, but at the same time, the real goal here is to have great students who are taught by great faculty, supported by outstanding staff, and the students go on to do what you do, which is to make a real mark in the world, and to make a real difference in the world, and to continue to support and love and cherish your university. So as I say, it's a privilege, but I'm just overhead here. It's really about everyone else. So let me talk a little bit about how the university is doing, and I think probably because I took over in the great crash, I spent a lot of time talking about the financial strength of the university. And I think it's really, really important for the alumni and for everyone to understand that the university is doing very well financially, and that Brett and I see Bruce Evans from the class of '81. He's a member of the Board of Trust. There's my great friend and mentor, John Hall, I see there. I don't know if I have any other trustees here, but we try to run a very prudent, conservative, well-managed university and steward it very, very carefully. I'm pleased to say that largely because of the work of so many other people, the university is very strong financially. Now, I haven't won an SEC football championship with the team, but we got our first AAA bond rating ever in Vanderbilt's history. And the other two rating agencies gave us AA+. They kind of upgraded us. And Brett, my CFO, and I were kind of joking. If we have a AAA, we can only go down. It's like going home with a grade point of 4.0. What's going to happen here? But the university is doing very, very strong. The university is doing very, very strong. So, or is very, very strong. A large part of the decision to restructure the medical center was because of the, I would say, complexity of governance, financing, and operating income concentration that came about over the years. And many of you know that healthcare is probably 20+% of the GDP, and that wasn't the case 40 years ago. So if it's 20% of the GDP and it's grown significantly, and we're in a leading academic medical center, you can imagine what happened to our revenue, liquidity, expenses, and debt portfolio. So as we looked, really beginning 5 years ago, we said, we're really kind of a healthcare holding company with hospitals and clinics, and we're attaching a university. So 70 to 80% of the revenue was coming out of the health system. And you kind of sit around and you can kind of deny the reality and say, well, it's always been this way, when in fact it wasn't always that way. The university was a much larger part of the financial footprint. And we had about $1.5 billion in debt on our balance sheet. And we do great medical care. We do the best in the world, but it is very capital intensive. It is very capital intensive. And so when you looked at the debt, the university side had about $200 million of debt, and the health system had $1.3 billion in debt. And so now you started looking at this and you said, well, what are our days cash on hand? And it was like, well, they're about 150 days cash on hand. And they say, what's the health system? And then it's kind of like when I took over, it's like 6 days. I mean, like 6 days? I mean, I got more, you know, that's like my rainy day fund when I was an assistant professor. So we started looking at things, and the board got really engaged. We had great board leadership, and we just said, we need to look at this to steward Vanderbilt. And what we did was we went on a bunch of field trips. We went to learn from other places, and we went around the country and visited all the great medical schools, all the great academic medical centers. And what we learned was we and Emory in Atlanta were the only universities that were structured like us, where you had all the hospitals, all the clinics owned, loaded on the balance sheet, all the physician plans in the university. And it's nice to be, as I say, unique at points, and you can say, we got this strategic advantage, but at some point you look at it and you say, boy, are we stupid. And we started looking at the future of healthcare, particularly consolidation and governance and access to capital, and we said we have to do something about this. And so we actually looked at other universities, and we kind of went to a model that the #1 school of medicine in the country has, Harvard Medical School, which is you have a great school of medicine and then you affiliate with hospitals and clinics and great physicians. And so we said, Eureka! We have all this on our campus. So all we're going to do is put the hospitals and clinics in a separate 501c3 and then enter into affiliation agreements. And the hardest part was really not conceptualizing how it would look. The hardest part was really writing all the agreements. And you know, we had more lawyers, consultants, accountants, and a fabulous team working very hard on that. But the consequence of that has been to remove a large part of the healthcare risk, to allow the healthcare system to grow and scale, to reduce the university's debt from $1.5 billion to $300 million. And I mentioned $200 million before. The CFO and I decided we'd take an extra $100 million on our balance sheet as an early birthday present for Jeff Balzer, the head of the medical center. So we've got a great balance sheet. We probably have the cleanest balance sheet in higher education. Of the top 25 universities, we have the lowest amount of debt. The lowest amount of debt. The next university above us is probably about $400 million, and the top one is $5 billion, I think, or $3 billion. And they're a lot wealthier than we are, but that's a lot of leverage on an institution. So I think the university is in phenomenal condition on the operating side, on the balance sheet side. The other thing we did was we did this without moving any of the endowments over. So many of you have given generously and consistently with great impact to the School of Medicine and to the programs in the School of Medicine. And those are kept with Vanderbilt, and we fulfill the purpose of your gift, and we steward your gift through granting your funds to the School of Medicine and the clinical enterprise. So I think it's really a very nice financial position. It gives us strategic and operating range of motion, and I think we're in really, really great shape. One other very positive thing is we have, and I want to emphasize this, our students are great, but the students really come for a great faculty too. We have an outstanding faculty. And one thing you may know is that the United States government has been cutting research in America. It's really perplexing to me that, when they're trying to get the budget in balance, which I support, that we would say, well, we know how to do this, let's cut research. And I'm like, well, isn't that kind of what America's strategic advantage is? Innovation, discovery, research. But despite the cuts in research, our research funding has actually been growing. This year with kind of all-in federal funding, we're about $600 million a year in grant money, and that's with flat or cut NIH budgets, a 6% increase over our budget. So you got to have your finances strong, and you got to have that in the right order. So with that, I think the academics are, really doing extraordinarily well. People talk about ratings all the time. There's ratings for everything. The U.S. News draws a lot of attention. I've been at Vanderbilt, as I said, now 30 years. I don't manage the university to the rankings. I try to have the best Vanderbilt, and if you do the best and you have the best Vanderbilt, people will notice. People will notice, and they will acknowledge that in any sort of rating systems. So we are 15th in U.S. News, our highest rating ever. Number 10th, best undergraduate teaching. As I want to emphasize, we are really a great research university, but at the core, we're a liberal arts college, and we treasure the teaching that our great faculty really does. We're the sixth best college for veterans, and for 2 years in a row, we were the happiest students in America. And then, I don't know how, I think Rice got it. And I know the president of Rice, and I saw him a while ago, and I said, well, I kind of did this as a favor to you. I said, you looked a little glum, and I wanted you to kind of, David, get a little happier. So now we're the second happiest students in America. And I mentioned this before, a lot of people point to the SAT and the academics, but to have such smart, talented young people, and then to say that they're happy is somewhat inconsistent with the conception that most people have of college at a great private research university. So I really treasure that. And I think there was a chart out on the SAT where we're like 6th or 7th highest SAT and ACT in the country, but we had the happiest students in America. And I don't think there's any other school where you would correlate high SAT with high happiness. And there might be some with low grades and high happiness, but that's more of a behavioral issue. That's more of what are you doing on Friday night or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night. So I think we're doing great. There's the old, if you build it, they will come. We just kind of said, we're Vanderbilt. We don't want to be any other school. We rely on our community. We rely on our interdisciplinarity. We rely on people generally like each other here. We're collegial. We're civil to each other. And with the introduction of Opportunity Vanderbilt, with the building of the freshman commons, with the introduction of more upper-class experiences like you're seeing at the new CASAM, which is really CASAM 3 as I refer to it, we're seeing a lot of students want to come. And so this year we had over 32,000 applications for 1,600 spots. The admit rate of Vanderbilt was 10.7%. Now it's really interesting if you are really keen on those bond ratings, go read the bond reports. They're public documents. And they all go through, if you read a university bond rating report, they specifically highlight your academics. Because you're like, how good are you at getting the best students? And so when you read these bond rating reports from S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, they'll actually say, wow, Vanderbilt is a great school. A lot of kids want to go there. And they only admitted 10% of the kids, and they've got really high test scores. And what they're really saying is, this is a great institution, and it has a great draw, and if something went bad in the night and you hit a bump, they'd make it. They're great. they're great. So it actually flows through not only to the young people that you'll interact with when you're here, the young people that I teach, but it actually is part of the financial strength and reputational power of the university. I think I'll talk much more about this, but we are training leaders to go out into a very diverse, complex world. The demographics of America, the demographics of the great institutions that our graduates are going to work at, they're changing dramatically. And we have to be alert to that. And so Vanderbilt now has 41% of its students are what we would classify as students of color from all around the world, from all around the world. And it's important to realize, and I was talking to the alumni board yesterday, if you are in a human capital business, and I'm a lawyer, I'm a professor, I'm a chancellor, all we are about is people. All we are about is people and the community that develops the potential. And so you have to adjust to changes. And if you do not adjust and you do not get intentional, your students will fail. And not only will your students fail in the world, people will not come to the university as society more generally changes. And so that's been an extraordinary change. But I want to emphasize, we're still this school of liberal arts and balance. When we admit a child, and we reject hundreds of students with perfect SATs, we're looking for students who have a balance of talents. We're not looking for, all I care about is, I want to go to class, I want to get high grades, I don't want to do anything out of class. And our real secret and our brand is balanced students. Students who are good socially, people who are good academically, people who work well by themselves, people who work well in groups, people who really care about what they're doing in life, but people who care about how they can help others in life. So our students tend to be a lot of double majors, econ and oboe, piano and physics, engineering and English. And that's what you want these students to be. That range of mind, that broad sense of inquiry, a tie to, I have multiple interests. Because that is what's going to allow them to be prepared to deal with all the questions that they will have to answer and they will confront going forward. 68% of the students have financial aid. More than 2/3 of the students are on scholarship. And they're all meritorious. They're all meritorious. When you look at the statistics, it's kind of like, well, who's on merit and who's on need? We have a lot of need-based, we have some merit-based, but everyone is with merit. Everyone here is outstanding. About 53% of them are on need-based aid. So the students, I think, are really just phenomenal. There's a lot of demand for the Vanderbilt experience. I looked at our recent student survey. 93% of the students are satisfied when they graduate from Vanderbilt, and that's something we're very, very proud of. The faculty I mentioned is extraordinary. We are unusual in that I think we are very focused on research, service, and teaching. I think our faculty is phenomenal in research, but they are also very dedicated to teaching. And so I think we're not a sort of university where hire these 20 people, throw them in a laboratory, don't let them near an undergraduate. They just couldn't do it. That's not how Vanderbilt actually hires and retains and promotes faculty. We really care about teaching. The most exciting thing I think that's happening more and more with our students, and as part of our strategic plan, is the students who are coming, who are so gifted and have so many interests, they want to work with faculty outside of the classroom. So as freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors, they are what we call immersed in research and discovery. And it can happen 100 yards from here in a cancer biology lab, or it can happen 3,000 miles away in Central America or South America where there's an anthropology dig. And so we really try to make our students part of research and discovery. And we know that passive learning and sitting in a classroom is not what they want to do. And you know, you can tell that's not what they want to do. They're doing texting, and they're reading the internet, and maybe even shopping if you don't engage them properly. So they're forcing us to get our game up. If you have a chance, go over to the new engineering and science building, which is right over the right field fence of the baseball stadium. I know Ed would refer affectionately to next to Olin Hall. And it is a celebration of innovation, discovery, interdisciplinarity, faculty and students and staff working together in and outside of the classroom. And it is really distinctly Vanderbilt. I keep track a lot of our faculty awards, our faculty distinction. We have a faculty that regularly receives the most prestigious awards. NSF Career Awards, NSF Merit, NIH Merit Awards, Pioneer Awards, Guggenheim Awards, Searle, MacArthur Genius Awards. And these are outstanding, committed, and brilliant faculty who love to teach, who just love to teach. You can walk across this campus and you can go in old Benson Science and you'll find that Vanderbilt is still very strong in the humanities, that our English department is world class. They are beginning to interact and connect more and more across the campus, not just the philosophy, but also science and medicine. But as you walk across the campus, you'll also see that personalized medicine, how do we use genomic information to discover new cures, is new and exciting at Vanderbilt. We're a world-class leader. You might have seen quite a fuss in the news. One of our faculty discovered that as much as we love our DNA and we think we're so unusual, there's actually snippets of Neanderthal DNA in the human genome. And it actually affects disease and behavior among humans. And so whether it's the most cutting edge, who are we? You know, who are we? Look at my genome. Will I be cured? Is there a new cure for my mom? Is there a new cure for my wife? We also say, well, where do we come from? What are the great texts? What is our journey through history? What is our journey as a human being? We're always investing in new spaces, new places. I had a number of people comment to me. I think Ed kindly mentioned the new Kassam Quad. I actually have had alumni say to me that they miss the old one. And I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty strong. It's kind of like when you have the attachment to the blanket as a little kid and it's all torn and shredded. There's a lot of goo on it from being a baby. Well, I think the new Kassam is spectacular. I don't know if I have any Vandy Barnard folks here. It's a beautiful kind of collegiate Gothic building that just did not stand the test of time. Did not stand the test of time. And so we decided that we had so much interest in Kassam, we had about 2,200 kids apply for about 660 spots. And so the students were telling us, we want more of this living, learning, residential experience. And so through some successful fundraising and wise stewardship, that building is hopefully soon coming out of the ground, because right now there's so much underground. I'm still hearing the blasting of the 500 million year old limestone outside my window and shuddering through Kirkland Hall. I mentioned the engineering and science building. I think the next kind of really big project for Vanderbilt is going to be to take those towers down. And I know there's sentiment in those buildings. And I was talking to an alum last night, and it was, maybe they're here, but it was a member of the Quint class. And it was a kind of a touchy conversation because I was talking about knocking the towers down, and the person said to me, well, geez, they're really not that old. And I'm looking at, I'm okay in math, and I'm like, Quink, 50 years, 1966. I think the first tower opened in 1966, and I didn't want to start talking about Stevenson because I figured I'd get another love fest over Stevenson. So I said, well, I think they're a little bit past their useful, depreciated life. I think that was a nice way to say, hey, I'm only a few years from Medicare, I'm old, so the towers are old. And then I think his spouse said, oh, God, they were built like just when we left. And so those are, going back to stewardship, they are a deferred maintenance nightmare. And I've had discussions over the years. It's like, well, could we fix them? I'm like, fix them? Fix them? How do you fix that? You'd have to strafe it or something like that, or just bulldoze, fix that. And then there have been discussions about, well, we could keep it, kind of going for a few more years, put new windows in. And I'm looking at all the windows, and I'm kind of like, I don't want to spend, I'm not buying new windows for that thing. It's like fixing up the old car that's, well past its prime. But not only are they well past their prime, we really need to invest because our whole strategy is access to higher education for the best kids. Opportunity Vanderbilt. Learning to be a leader in an interdisciplinary university. That's Vanderbilt. And living and learning on campus. I think the secret to Vanderbilt is community friendship outside of the classroom. And there are a lot of schools where you can be a commuter student, you can live off campus. Some kids like to live off campus. I reminded the alumni, I've told the kids, I got news for you. The next 50 years, off campus. So maybe you should live on the college campus. Yeah? And I remind you all, the kids will say to me, I want to be independent. And I'm like, okay, well, come to me with your jobs that you're paying the rent and tell me how independent you are. I want to see the cash flow out of all your work and see how independent you are. So our students don't really want to live on campus. They want to live with friends. They want to live with classmates. They want to learn and live across difference. They want to know what is it like to go to school with over 50 religions represented. And what I want to do, I want to go trade currency in Singapore. Well, you better stretch yourself. You better stretch yourself. I'm going to go teach for America. You better stretch yourself. You better stretch yourself. I want to be the governor of X. You better stretch yourself. You better stretch yourself. I want to start a new not-for-profit. Okay, you better stretch yourself. Be proximate. Be connected. Be alert. Learn together. So I think towers will come down over the next several years. Towers will come down. They will come down. As I've said before, I've said it, Mr. Gorbachev, take these towers down. So those will be the sorts of capital projects we'll see. Another big capital project that we're talking about is, do I have any PhDs, MBAs, JDs in here? Raise your hand. I'm not asking, a sensitive question, I hope. PhDs, MBAs, JDs, okay. So one thing that we have PhDs, okay. One thing that we don't really focus on is what is the living learning experience of our graduate students and professional students. We focus so much on these undergraduates, which I think we have to do, but what is the community for the other students? And we've basically moved them into a commuter class. And I think it's wrong. And I think it destroys the community on the campus. It affects the recruiting of the students, and it affects their own educational experience not to be part of the community. If you're a PhD student, you're here all the time. And your mentor is still not happy. Still not happy. More work, more results. Do the experiment again. Another draft of that dissertation chapter. Now I've got to drive home 45 minutes. So we're actually looking at building a graduate student village. And it will be for law students, divinity students, business students, and PhD students. And we're probably going to put it, as I told the alumni board yesterday, where the IHOP used to be. Well, it's not there anymore, so don't blame me for knocking it down. And then I really stretched people. I said, well, where Max and Mario's used to be. Yeah, okay, so Max, you know, that's great. I see it there all the time as a new faculty member. The worst indigestion teaching administrative law I've ever had. Worst indigestion. So I think we're talking about this is the Vanderbilt we want. Bright, young, diverse, talented people living and learning across sameness and difference in a multidisciplinary university where if you're interested in studying biophysics or you're interested in learning ancient languages, we're all committed to this collective enterprise. And we're all getting better because we're all here together. You'll hear me over the next couple of years also mention mental health and well-being on our college campuses. There are a lot of discussions in the newspaper about stress on college campuses. It's something that I think is important. I think we have to be open and honest and talk about the issues of mental health, that young people are managing as they come to school, issues of mental health and well-being that sometimes emerge when a child comes to college, and also the looking at alcohol and drugs as not, just not something we're just going to penalize all the time, but really asking why is somebody using alcohol too much, or why is somebody using drugs, and to try to have more of a caring, compassionate, healing, holistic approach to taking care of the kids that come to school. So I think it's something that people have not wanted to talk about a lot on a college campus, and I think it's something that people in America don't want to talk about, but I think it's a really, really important challenge for us to take on. And I want to be known as the university that takes the best care of its students and its faculty and its staff, and that it works with them to develop the full potential that they have. And as bumps come along, as they inevitably do in life, we're caring and we're compassionate. With the kind of carving out of the medical center, I won't say I have a lot of free time. There's always something to do, and I love it. But I've always tried to teach at Vanderbilt. I gave up teaching law students about 13 years ago. I still get the itch. I still, want to walk in there, civil procedure the first day and say, can someone tell me the facts of Pennoyer against Neff, and have the students, I don't know what the facts are. No one understood the case, and spend 3 weeks on the facts. I kind of miss the old days. But I just decided I had taught a lot of lawyers, and many of them coming back to reunite today, but I want to teach the undergraduates because they're kind of really the heart and soul, and they define the culture. So I started teaching undergraduates, and I teach a course on the Federalist Papers, actually. And I feel like I should have bought a call option on making Hamilton as a musical. Because I've been, ever since I was in college, I've been obsessed with Alexander Hamilton. Obsessed with Hamilton. He's my FF, favorite founder. FF, favorite founder. So I started teaching this course on the Federalist Papers to a bunch of really talented kids, and they're just remarkable. And it was really quite interesting. They really, I think, enjoyed the class because it's really this question of founding and who are the founders, and this project called We the People. We the people to form a more perfect union. And I teach the class as very much what was their conception of We the People and how has We the People changed over those 200 years. And it's a really great journey to be on with these kids. And they love it, but they kind of really got into it when Hamilton was made. And then it's like I kind of went from square to almost cool, but not quite. And I kind of hit cool last year. I took about 20 of my students to see Taylor Swift, and they thought that was really cool. We did a contest to Twitter, what do you love the most about Vanderbilt? And then we kind of picked a bunch of the best ones. We did a lottery, and surprisingly, a lot of people won, but they didn't say anything about the Chancellor being the best. But they enjoyed their time at the concert. And then we had a lovely time several weeks ago at the Beyonce concert, and that was really a lot of fun. I kind of ghosted out about 11 o'clock. You know, I turned into a pumpkin well before the kids were, you know, kind of dancing away. So I really like to spend time with the students. Students are why we're here. So final initiative I want to mention is land use planning. One of the things that really kind of keeps me up at night is Vanderbilt's placement in this great city of Nashville that is growing like weeds in a vacant lot. And I'm a little nervous about the choking and the traffic and the loss of a university in the middle of a great mid-sized historic American city, and the ability of a young person to come to school here and walk across and say, boy, you have a beautiful campus, it's really a college campus, but I really want to go see a hockey game. It's like, all right, take an Uber 1 mile away, go see hockey, come back. But I'm a little concerned about the growth of Nashville. And I think a lot of our efforts on graduate housing and other things are really to bring our community together and then to reduce even our traffic footprint. And so we've started a big land use planning project for Vanderbilt and for the city in cooperation. And to really say, what are our boundaries? What are our borders? What are our future building plans? What should our campus look like? How do we work on sustainability? How do young people think about cars now with new technology? And notice we have the long-term perspective. What is Uber, what is Tesla going to do with automobiles, self-driving cars over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And so it's this really great investigation, this really great inquiry of what is our city going to be like? How do we preserve the distinctive Vanderbilt footprint and culture? And then how are we good stewards of our land? Because we can't grow land. We can't move Vanderbilt. Now we can buy buildings on occasion, and you'll, particularly people in the local community, might have noticed that we're buying a little bit more property than we typically have. And that's really to protect the boundaries and see orderly Vanderbilt partnerships, because this building that was built across from the law school is going to be quite a traffic challenge. And I love the way the city planners love the city, love the mayor, she's a Vanderbilt graduate, but the solution seems to be put 2 stoplights up, it solves everything. And I'm kind of like, well, all right, get me a civil engineer to do a little traffic modeling, and how long is the line at the red light? You know, the line at the red light will be out to Jackson. Not Tennessee, Mississippi. So we got to be really, really intentional about that. So let me just say, as Ed said, I really do believe we have the very best alumni. Your university is doing great. We're not perfect. We don't take anything for granted. We work hard every day to make it better. Almost 25% of the Vanderbilt undergraduate alumni made a gift last year. Over $35 million came from undergraduate alumni in our giving last year. Vanderbilt raised a record $173 million last year. More than 8,000 alumni attended events last year, hosted by one of the Vanderbilt chapters. So, thank you for being here. Stay engaged. Keep being engaged. Look for ways, whether it's over the internet and in your own community, to find ways to be connected to alma mater. So, thank you, and with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Questions?
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
When you acquired Streetbody, did you know that they
Yeah, when I acquired Peabody, when Peabody was acquired, I was 19 years old. And so, yeah, I think that the university probably did know that it was acquired. I think over the years, actually, the minute it was renovated and opened, it was controversial and divisive. And there were students and faculty and staff who said, I might not want to live there. I think it sends the wrong signal. And so from the very beginning, when it was opened in the 80s, it was a source of strong, strong disagreement. And it actually affected the university adversely and sent signals and was a symbol that, frankly, held the university back. In 2003, Chancellor Gee and his management team tried to change the name, and a local court rejected that. Over the years, the faculty, the staff, and the students have told me repeatedly that this has held Vanderbilt back. I've had faculty turn down job offers, I've had students not come, and I've had staff say this is very, very challenging for us to have this as a symbol on our campus with you expecting us to be included and treated equally. And so with that, I thought it was time really to take a look at that and say, this is really not Vanderbilt. This is really not Vanderbilt. And we have to change this. The Board of Trust got engaged. They appointed a committee. The committee looked at it and recommended that the name be changed. And that's how it was resolved. I find it actually counter-historical. And I don't know if you read the note I wrote to the community. Our university was started by Cornelius Vanderbilt. And Cornelius Vanderbilt started the university to heal up the wounds between the North and the South, to preserve union. And I think that that's been the charge that I have always lived with. I think it's odd that we would keep that building with its name on it, given the founding charge. And certainly when you went to school, that was not even a part of Vanderbilt. That was not even a part of Vanderbilt. So, yeah, there was no such hall. So when it comes in, I think it is a source of controversy. And if you look at the history, the minute it is given, there's a plaque. And the plaque is there to explain what this is about. And over time, that has just not served the university well. I've been accused of many things, rewriting history. I've been compared to Stalin, even though I don't have a mustache. And I just don't think the building ever taught anyone anything. I don't know why people say it's rewriting history. That Vanderbilt's history, certainly a Southern university. But to say that the Commodore somehow said, hey, throw this up here, I just don't think that that really is rewriting history. And I just don't think that building ever taught anyone anything about race, slavery, the Civil War, and the reconciliation that has to come to our country, and I think in many ways is occurring on our campus. So, next question? Yes?
You mentioned taking down the towers. Could you share with us your vision as to what you'd like to see replaced?
Boy, I wish I had pictures.
Oh, me too.
I wish I had some pictures of this. So, I think what we'd like to see is, and you can kind of see it in Kassam. I think you'll see it in the new building. Vanderbilt, the one thing I love about Vanderbilt is it doesn't have a consistent architecture. I mean, no, but I mean, has anyone been at Emory or Rice? Yeah, I mean, you walk across the campus and everything is a first, second, third, fourth derivative of a model of architecture. And what I like about Vanderbilt is Furman is not Calhoun. Calhoun is not Benson Science. And the buildings are all very, very different. Nobody imprinted that consistency of architecture. And so I view the buildings, I refer to them as beautiful masters. Like you walk into an art gallery, but it's not like, oh, there's all Picasso. Can I see a Monet? Could I see a Raphael? Where's the next room to go to? What I like is our buildings are. There's a Raphael, there's a Monet, there's a Picasso, there's a Michelangelo. So I like the eclecticism. But the second thing I kind of generally like is we have not gone kind of really wacko on modern architecture. And that you have to be careful about. I really like Frank Gehry, and so you get the Disney Symphony Hall, which is beautiful, but impossible to take care of, bad music, and what will people say in 50 years? So you've got to look at your architecture on the campus. So what we're going to do is we'll bring elements of collegiate Gothic, Romanesque, forward out of the existing buildings, and the building that will start at across from the bookstore will reflect that. And it'll have the mixtures, much like Neely Auditorium, stone, brick. I think the one thing that we probably do want to do is, I think when you come to Vanderbilt, it is a beautiful campus surrounded by trees, which is great, but when you come certainly from the west, you see these towers, and you say, what's there? And you say, well, that's one of the greatest universities in the world. And it's like, they must have darn good students and faculty because their buildings, why would anyone go there? And so I think you'll start to see the university being very intentional about West End and the buildings. And that there'll be more of a sense that, this might be the wrong way to put it, but I remember the first time when I went to Washington, D.C., when I was practicing law, I went for a visit to get an apartment. And maybe I'm just a sucker for our history and patriotism, but I remember driving down Constitution Avenue, past the National Archives, past the Department of Justice, Treasury Department, the Commerce Department, and it just was, this has always been here and it always will be here. And so I think the architecture has to make that statement. The final point I'll tell you is the kids want historical, traditional design. The young people, when you talk to them, they say, I want to go to a place that feels like it's been there forever and will be there forever. And I think that's kind of what I hear from the students and faculty. So I think you'll see the architecture of the campus pulled forward down West End. I also think that you might see a little bit more effort that instead of a tall Carmichael Tower, you might see a Gothic tower that is going to talk to Kirkland Hall in some way. And that you'd have these guideposts as you came down the street, and you'd say, wow, I can see the towers of this great university. And so I think that's probably what it'll be like. I try not to get involved in the architecture. I love architecture, but the minute I get involved in it, it's like redoing the house. The budget will go up 30%, and there'll be a bunch of fights on the family, and but I think I just want it to look like Vanderbilt. Yeah.
When you did the 501c3 separation, did the medical school stay with the undergraduate school and the clinical practice group move over?
Genius. Boy, that's a great question. Are you a physician?
I am.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, great. So, great question. Great question. Did the 501c3 status travel? And did the practice group travel and the medical school travel? Is that the, yeah. So where do you practice?
I'm in Washington University in St. Louis. We had a similar kind of.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah.
The medical school is separated from the clinical practice.
Yeah.
And I'm the director of the culinary department at one of the community hospitals.
Yeah, so you, as we say, have cracked the code, or as I used to say to my students, you've slipped on the banana peel. You've gotten the key question. So we went on field trips. One, of course, was to Washington University. And we spent a day there with Mark Wrighton and Steve Lipstein and Larry. He was just moving as dean out, and then the old dean I got to know. So we went all around the country. And what we observed was, I think we learned that Johns Hopkins, Wash U, Duke is even funkier because their practice plan is almost a separate foundation, not controlled by the university. The typical model was you own everything, which is Emory and Vanderbilt. The other extreme model is you own nothing and you affiliate. That's Harvard. And then you could just drop them on the distribution. Wash U and Johns Hopkins and Northwestern pre-2014-15 transaction was the model. And that was the model that everyone would generally go with if you had to make a choice. And it was my initial instinct, which is keep the faculty practice plan in the university, which is Wash U, et cetera. So, and it goes to the old story, I've told it before. When people go to the doctor, they go to the doctor. The hospital's great, the clinics are great, hopefully the parking is good, but it's really, who's my doctor? Who's my pulmonologist? So you always kept the doctors. And as we say, if you had to make a choice between owning the Yankees or Yankee Stadium, Yankees. There's no question. You know, anyone, as we know in America, will probably build you a stadium. So the typical model was you kept the doctors no matter what. But then what we started to see, and it's happening at Wash U, which is the hospitals and clinics really control the physicians. And you're going to bundled payments. And you're going to basically almost self-insurance with readmission dings coming back to you. And so this model that was pretty traditional of, I'm Johns Hopkins professor, I go to Johns Hopkins Hospital, or I go to BJC, but I'm back here employed by, it's just not going to work, we believe. And you've got to manage your physicians in the hospital. And the biggest advantage Vanderbilt has is we have a great hospital, but we, like you, have one of the largest medical practice subspecialty plans in the country. So the future was really putting them together. And so we also saw that Northwestern had sold its physicians to Northwestern Hospital Corporation, which was kind of a jaw dropper because they don't sell the Yankees. And so we started looking at, and Brett is much smarter than I am on this, and we had all these wise people come in, but we went on these field trips. But I distinctly remember Wash U. So I was sitting in the room with the head of the hospitals and clinics, and he's kind of advising us. And I can see he's kind of trying to keep Wash U in the practice plan, but he's trying to grow into Illinois, Missouri, and try to expand his footprint with non-Wash U schools. And the tension was just palpable. So I said, okay, Steve, I got a question for you. What would you do if you were Vanderbilt? And he said, well, that's easy. He said, you're the luckiest person in the world because you actually have everything together. So you don't have the School of Medicine clinical people butting heads. You're integrated totally. So all you do is you put the practice plan and you put the hospitals and clinics in a new 501c3, you enter into research and education affiliation agreements, and then you go forward together. And that's what we did. And so the School of Medicine still is Vanderbilt. And it's always been Vanderbilt. The School of Nursing, the College of Arts and Science, Vanderbilt. But then the Department of Surgery. It is a Vanderbilt clinical department in VUMC. we, under our agreements, only I can appoint professors too. So every professorial appointment comes through me and the provost. And then I actually appoint the department chairs. And so we actually think we have a pretty good model. I don't know what you think of it, but
It's going to be a war between BJC and
yeah,
WashU because
yeah. Brett? Yeah, we kind of saw the storm clouds because it's like, well, we don't need you anymore. We're going to Springfield. You know, we're going to Chicago. So, very good question. Very good question. Very good question. Any other questions? Yes.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on the rising cost of tuition.
Yeah, you probably don't because my answer might not be. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let me take a shot at this. Time's up. Last question. But it's a question, that everyone has, and I'm going to take a few more minutes. The alumni board heard my tutorial. I could start it in another way. What would you cut? No, I'm really serious. Like, I subsidize athletics $15 million. There's $15 million. I could get rid of the freshman seminars, probably save $10 million. I could go to part-time faculty. I could probably save $30 million. I could get rid of residential halls and just say you're living off campus. I could get rid of scholarship. What would you cut? No, I don't mean to paint you in a corner, but here's the answer. Here's my view of the world, and it comes from being biased, being a college president. It starts out with America's greatest institutions are its universities like Vanderbilt and Berkeley and Wisconsin and Michigan and Harvard and Yale. All of them. If you look at the top universities in the world, and you look at where all the money was, the balance of currencies 5-10 years ago, which have basically flipped. There are great universities in Russia. Name the 5 of them. Did your kids look at them? I bet Russian kids looked at ours if they could get out. Okay, name the 10 great universities in the most populous country in the world. China. Can't do it. Did your kids look at going to school in China? No. You think any Chinese kids want to come to America to go to college? And when they come, what do they want to do? Stay. Yeah, okay. So India, I think second most populous country in the world. John, do they have one? Is there MIT, one of the top universities? Yes. Yes, yeah. Okay, so we'll give them a couple in the top 100, yeah. But where do those kids want to come for school after they go to undergraduate school and still want to come to America? Right. So they've got one. I'm going to go around. I'd like to say, Greece. Plato's Academy doesn't make it in the top anymore, although it's got a good pedigree. Bulgaria, Romania, Poland. Nothing's knocking me. I'll go to the Netherlands. Probably 1 or 2 there. Germany's got something funky. Really great universities. But if you travel, they got these Max Planck institutes, which are not part of universities. And the Germans actually get frustrated because America does research in the university, Germany does it in Max Planck. And so, but Germany has some very good universities. Probably Heidelberg is a really great university. They're Max Planck Institute that win Nobel Prizes. France probably has a couple. The Netherlands, maybe 1 or 2. And Great Britain and Japan would have some. Canada, Toronto's very good. McGill's very good. And then it's kind of like, make way for the Americans. So I always say, I just wish people, particularly in Washington, would just get a little more enthusiastic about us. And in the states. The real tragedy on the cost of education, frankly, is the state universities. When I grew up in Wisconsin. So, my parents didn't have it, wouldn't have done it. They're not going to write a check to go to Vanderbilt. They're going to say, go to the University of Wisconsin. Pay $100. It's a world-class university. That university now has less than 10% of its budget coming from the state. And big surprise, the government still wants to regulate the heck out of it. Wow. Wow. So you've stripped these state flagships of all the money. And there are reasons for it. I think healthcare costs are growing very quickly. We're not getting any younger. on the federal and the state level. So you've kind of really cut that out as a lifeline. They're driving tuition up there. And they're cutting classes, and it's hard to graduate, and they're shrinking faculty, and they're shutting down research institutes. So those have been cut off. So now let's get to the Vanderbilts of the world, and just higher education in general. I gave a short disquisition, which I'll try in front of this group with hopes that you will go tell your neighbors, friends, and others about it. There's actually, my first question prompted your response because there's actually a whole body of economics on higher ed. And there's a number of books on it by a Princeton professor named William Baumol. And he actually has something called Baumel's Curse. And he didn't win the Nobel Prize for it, but he's a member of the National Academy. I think he's passed. So I always teach, as the Alumni Board knows, many of you have heard, I always teach the cost of higher ed through Beethoven's Ninth. So who likes Beethoven's Ninth? How can you not? How can you not? Okay, I love it. Okay, so how many people, it's 1890, and we're going to go to the orchestra, we're in Vienna, and we're going to go hear Beethoven's Ninth. And we're strolling down the plaza, we're going to hear Beethoven's Ninth, we're all excited, we got the white tails on, we're all dressed up. How many people are going to perform Beethoven's Ninth for us? How many people does it take? A lot. Well, you're Vanderbilt graduates. You can do better than that, darn it. 150, we decided yesterday. It's got 150 people. All right, it's 1890, you got the chorus back there, and you're just like, this is almost as good as a Commodore win. I mean, you're so excited, as a chorus, you know. Okay. So now it's 2016. And I say to my lovely spouse, Lydia, and my children, who actually love Beethoven, we're going to go hear Beethoven's Ninth. Not a trick question here. How many people does it take to perform Beethoven's Ninth today? 150. Okay, so now, what if we paid the musicians the same today to perform Beethoven's Ninth as we did in 1890? You know, wouldn't work, right? So what does that tell us? There are certain things that don't drive to efficiency over long periods of time, and the only way to make them efficient is, as I said to you, destroy the experience. So you can listen to Beethoven's Ninth, get in your car and throw a CD on. I can teach kids that way. Calculus, throw the CD in. Get on the internet, Beethoven's Ninth. So the problem that Professor Baumol pointed out was there are certain experiences that are very high human touch, human capital. And if you, that will not see efficiency gains in the core business. But if you want efficiency gains, you'll destroy the experience. And so that's why I said, would you get rid of freshman seminars? Why not just double the faculty-student ratio? So there are things you can do, but you destroy the Vanderbilt experience. The two drivers of higher education costs are healthcare costs. I don't know, any running a business? What are your healthcare costs growing every year? Yeah, how much? 15, 20%. Yeah, and it just kills you. And then Ed was kind enough to refer to my kind of Don Quixote-like tilting at windmills on regulatory reform. 11% of all Vanderbilt money ex-clinical goes to payments for regulation. $147 million a year. $147 million a year. And I've been, you know, these politicians in Washington, both sides, the one side wants to give away free, the other one wants to steer college endowments that were given by private donors, which I'm like, boy, I mean, that's bad. So I finally said to some of the senators, I said, I tell you what, handshake deal. You stop regulating, and I'll freeze my tuition. Well, we can't do that. You don't understand. It's like, well, I don't understand you, but you understand me? I mean, I'm like into the reciprocal thing. We'll just jump in the pool together. You're like, let's all dive in the cold water, and then it's like, didn't go in. No. So those are the two big drivers. But we really squeeze the efficiency out. I mean, Brett is our CFO, Chief Financial Officer, cheap financial officer. Yeah. If you look at our overhead costs compared to our peers, right, Brett? Brett worked at Harvard, and our building costs, our overhead costs. I mean, Harvard's endowment is $35 billion. Ours is $4 billion. Why do kids look at both of us? I consider us really out-punching our weight. But the cost drivers, I could cut costs a lot. But the cost drivers are not the faculty or the students or the staff. It is really, I'd almost call them exogenous forces. But it's a very, we get $600 million of research funding. $150 million is under reimbursed to us for our costs. So every grant we get from the federal government to do personalized medicine, we have to put 20 cents on top of it. You're in research, it's not a margin business. So, and then the government cuts research. And it's like, well, you should just freeze your tuition, cut your tuition, we're going to cut your research funding, we're going to over-regulate you, and go work. And I'm like, have you ever run anything? 1 and 1 and 1 is 62 to the third? So the cost drivers are not what people think. They're other things, and this is a unique experience. Vanderbilt's going to be one of the 8 schools that is residential, meets full need without loans, trans-institutional research and discovery in a living, learning community. This is shocking, too. If you make $350,000 a year or less, it's cheaper to send your child to Vanderbilt than an out-of-state flagship. So where do you live? Yeah, so if you say my son wants to go to Michigan, if you have $350,000 in income or less, cheaper to send your child to Vanderbilt. Yeah. On average, if you live in Michigan, it's cheaper to send your child to Vanderbilt if you make $150,000 or less, because the state tuitions are going up like this. They're not taking as many in-state kids, and all they're doing is loading up their class with full-paying out-of-state and international kids. And they've turned their back on the core mission of educating the kid down the street. And we're doing that. We are doing that. So I told you, great question. I don't know if you like the answer. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much.